Hey, welcome back to another exciting episode of YOML, a year of much good learning. Today we're on episode 124 and we want to discuss about drugs. So, let Chris tell you why.
Yes, this is all about drugs today. The book that we're going to be talking about is a book called 10 Drugs, How Plants, Powders, and Pills Have Shaped the History of Modern Medicine by the author Thomas Hager. Thomas Hager is, I think we've already covered two of his other books, the Alchemy of Air and what was the other one?
The one about the Alchemy of Air. I don't remember that one.
I think that was like one of the like number 10 or something like that, or like 15 or something along those lines. And then
I remember him. I remember his picture.
Yeah, I think we did another one too. God, why can't I remember the name of the book? It's the one about not the fertilizer, which is about the alchemy of air. It's the one about I'm spacing right now. But I'll have to. Anyway, I think I've read like I want to say maybe 3 or 4 of Thomas Hager's books. I actually really like him. He makes a very provocative. You learn a lot with it, but you actually, it's like tangible learning. I feel like it's usually all medical based, drug based. Oh, the first antibiotics.
Right.
The Demon Under the Microscope. Yeah, the Demon Under the Microscope and the Alchemy of Air. Those are his other 2 books. They're both really, really good. Those are he wraps like these really cool stories about like innovation and medicine and how things came about. Like he goes in depth onto that particular story. So it's like a really great story that he tells. It's pretty entertaining. And
so basically this book is a combination of the Alchemy Air and the Demon Under Microscope and plus 8 other ones.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's like a shorter, condensed version of each one of these stories. So it talks about like how opioids first started, or how antibiotics, like kind of like the Demon Under the Microscope, or talks about I'm gonna butcher the name, monoclonal antibodies. Like newer stuff, Viagra, statins. He goes through like just a bunch of different drugs and the stories of how they were discovered and how they were, how they've shaped lives. And it's not all necessarily drugs, because he does talk a little bit about just like vaccines and how they first came about and stuff like that. So it's kind of like in general drug class, like sometimes it's not necessarily a specific drug, but it was really interesting. I really enjoyed it. So on to the reflection. I would actually highly recommend this book. I had my dad loves books like this kind of stuff as well. So my dad was looking for a recommendation one day, and I told him about this one, and he won't stop talking to me about it. He's like, oh man, we were out on the golf course the other day, and he was brought up this multiple times about you remember how in the 10 drugs, like blah 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 blah. And it was a fun conversation, because it was really informative. I mean, I learned a lot about like the history of opioids, like which was kind of crazy, like just how we repeat ourselves over and over and over again with that particular drug. Like we want to find a way. Did you know that Bayer invented heroin? Bayer, like
Bayer?
Like Bayer aspirin, like they invented heroin. Like I had no idea. Like Bayer invented heroin. I mean, it was a drug that they released and it was kind of a flop, and they were like, whatever, we don't really care about it. So like
isn't it a flop? Because heroin was used widely back in the days for the soldiers and whatnot.
Yeah, it was a pretty much a flop in general. Overall, it didn't accomplish for whatever reason, it didn't achieve the commercial success they were hoping to achieve. So they just kind of gave up on it. But obviously we all know what heroin is today. But yeah, no, Bayer invented heroin. Anyway, it's stories like that, where you're like, holy shit,
that's just a surprising piece of information.
It's blows your mind how many times throughout history that we've repeated ourselves over and over again, especially with opioids, where we keep trying to find a way to make them safe and non-addictive.
Well, it's like one of those things where you have some benefits and there is some side effects, and you can't let go of it And so you try to say, well, I wonder if I can take away the negative effect, so they can continue to
They can't.
experiment and whatnot. And so to me, it's one of those things where I guess the benefit is too good to let go.
Oh, for sure. I'm not saying opioids are like the scourge of the world. It's how we use them and how we keep trying to think that they can be regularly used. Opioids are intended to be used for, like, my daughter's situation where she was getting a morphine drip and a fentanyl doses because she was in a lot of pain, like, and like, that's when you use those kind of things. And we're going to talk actually, I finished a book called Dreamland a couple months ago. And it was all about the opioid epidemic here in the United States. And so we can get way more into opioids in the future and kind of how that all came about. But anyway, either way, this book was really interesting. I learned a lot. And another interesting tidbit was vaccines were first discovered. It seems like they were discovered in England, but they really weren't. Actually, were discovered by this lady who took a trip to the Middle East, and during everybody had smallpox, and like, in England and Europe, like, you would see smallpox like on people's faces and stuff like that, like the scars, if you survived, kind of thing. And she went over there, and she didn't see that with any of the women or any of the kids over in the Middle East country that she was touring and visiting for some weird reason. And she saw them like scratching their like a needle, and the kids would get sick for like a day. And she was like, "What are you guys doing?" She was like, "Well, this is how we, this is why we don't have smallpox." And she was like, "That's crazy," and so she brought it back to the UK. Nobody would listen to her, and finally, through a couple of people doing random testings and things like that, like it bubbled up, and it became more accepted, and then that's how the first vaccines were commercially invented, I guess, in general, which was like fascinating as well. I didn't know that, so anyway, enough about what we learned in 10 Drugs. It was a good book. It was something, I would recommend for people to check out. However, onto the reflection for the day. The reflection title for this one was there are no quick fixes to live in a balanced life. What I'm going to start this reflection by talking a little bit about modern medicine is incredible. Like, just to be crystal clear, like, it is unreal. I've seen it in action, many a times. My children would not be here. Either one of them would not be here without modern medicine and its intervention and interventionality, and how it can, in an emergency situation, can really like, it's pretty brilliant, some of the stuff that we can do and what we've learned. And especially like these doctors and nurses, like, I will forever indebted into I will be forever in their debt for what they did, and their knowledge and all the studying and things like that have gone on through the course of human history to be able to get us to the point in time where my children can have a chance at life, through understanding drugs and how they interact with the body and how they can counteract things in an emergency situation. I talked about it in my book. I can't imagine, the first time that Amelia had her big surgery, her blood pressure dropped pretty dramatically, and then like they used through it, like nobody panicked, right? They all just huddled up. They Amelia was in a lot of trouble physically, and I didn't know what was going on. I'm just sitting over in the corner of the room and freaking out. Her stats on her monitors are all out of whack. I mean, it's a really scary moment, in general. After her surgery, her blood pressure was dropping pretty dramatically, which, like, you don't want lower blood pressure. Like, I mean, low blood pressure, we all ask for it, but like when it goes low,
blood
like,
pressure
that's
or
bad.
high blood pressure. You don't want neither. You gotta have to balance.
You want balanced blood pressure. Yeah, exactly. And Amelia was having her body was fighting off the surgery and the trauma from the surgery, and her blood pressure was dropping, which was shutting down her organs, which then can cascade effect of a lot of other different things start to happen when that happens, right? So the doctors and nurses, like, all huddled up, and I'm over there, like, basically shitting my pants, watching this. I was by myself because we couldn't have two parents, at the hospital at the time because of COVID. And I'm just sitting there in the corner of this room and like, just like going, what are we doing? They just calmly huddled up, talked about what they needed, called down to the pharmacy. 20 minutes later, the drugs arrived. Our nurse, she is incredible. She just went to work, man, like restringing lines all over the place and different drugs and yada, yada, yada. And, within 2 hours later, Amelia was back to a stable state, and we were in a good spot. And I mean, I can't tell you how like intense those moments were, but like knowing what to do with dopamine, which is what the drug they ended up using, or epinephrine, if you needed to do that. I mean, Amelia at one point in time was on epinephrine, or all these other. I mean, there was morphine, fentanyl, whatever. I mean, there was a million different things that Amelia was on at various stages of her time, and
right,
and especially in the last couple days of her life, that was when the opioids were most impactful for our family. I could visibly see whenever she would need it, and then as soon as we would administer a dose that she needed it in our last couple of days, like she was at peace, she was calm. I could see the pain would go away from her, and gave me a bit of relief just watching her life, and we could have a little bit more time with her and figure things out. Anyway, I say all this to say, like, modern medicine is truly incredible, in an emergency situation specifically. Now fast forward to, you see all these like TV commercials all the time. I feel like I was asking Felicia this the other day. When you turn on the TV these days, like, I'll ask you the same question. Like, what do you see the majority of commercials as? Like, how or what percentage of commercials do you think are pharmaceutical related commercials?
I would say at least 60-80%.
I was going to say 60. I mean, I feel like there's a drug for everything.
You constantly see them everywhere.
All day. Like, that's pretty much like the majority of our advertising that happens on, at least on television, is drugs, right? I mean, and it's drugs for this. The funniest one that I've always seen, I can't remember the name of the drug, but it's about opioid induced constipation. So like, you take your opioid, but too much opioids will make you constipated. So now we have this other drug to like counteract that drug because you're addicted to opioids and you shouldn't be taking, anyway.
It's a vicious cycle that never ends.
It's a vicious cycle that never ends, right? So like, I say all this to illustrate the fact of drugs are important, and I'm not shitting on drugs and medicine in general. In an emergency situation, it's incredible. I mean, it's saved. I can't even imagine how many lives, millions upon millions of human lives have been saved through vaccines, through opioids, through whatever, or pain has been lessened, at the most crucial stages of life. However, that said, like, the book made me really think about, like, man, we spend so much time like trying to medicate our problems that are not emergency situations. These are problems that you need to like do what we talk about all the time, which is like dig deep, understand the underlying root cause of these things. You are never going to get a quick fix from some drug that's going to solve a long-term problem that isn't an emergency situation. Like, that's not how that's not how life works. Like, I don't care if you have anxiety, if you have fear, if you're happy, if you're overweight, if you're underweight, if you're in pain, whatever. Like, there's just no way that a pill will ever solve those problems. It can lessen it in an emergency situation, and don't get me wrong, like I said, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do things in an emergency situation, but that is never a long-term solution, in my personal opinion, with the pharmaceutical industry and statins and all these other things that they pitch you. You should be on for forever. And really, it comes down to living a balanced life. I mean, this is what we talk about all the time. This is what Clubany is based on. This is what we care about. This is why we do what we do. If something is off balance in your life or your health or whatever, like, you can't just take a pill and make it magically go away. You got to go do the work. You got to go figure out what is important in your life. Go figure out how to go change that, and put in the work and the time and reprogramming your body and listening to it, because that's how the universe works, is on harmony and balance, right? Like, it doesn't work on a pill all the time to counteract something else, because you have no idea what other cascading downstream effects that are going to happen by doing those things long term, if you don't address what's actually going on. So that was what this book really made me think about. Is it's like, it's just there's no quick fixes to life. Like, there's no quick fixes to living a balanced life. That is the title of this. And you got to put in the time, and you got to do the work. Like, and that's it. Like, I mean, point blank period. Right. So I'll pause there. The question I asked was, what crutches do you lean on for quick fixes to your problems? What would life look like without them? So something to think about, but I know you probably have a lot of comments on this one. So I'll pause there and love to get your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I could not agree more, just because it's exactly how I feel. it reminds me of the concept of teaching a man how to fish versus fishing for him, because sometimes when you fish for him, he doesn't learn.
Right.
And so same thing with medicine. And when we take medicine, the medicine is doing the job of the bodies, and the body doesn't adjust. And so it's not a long-term solution, but it is a intervention. So
Right.
if you imagine a guy who doesn't know how to fish, but he's too weak because he's too hungry, he cannot fish. So he relies on the man, the fisherman, to fish one fish for him, to give him the fish to eat, to gain his strength. And then after that, he needs to learn how to fish. He cannot continue to rely on the other fishermen trying to give him the fish all day long. Same thing with the body. Your body they need to do its work. You cannot let the medication do the work for you. And so I cannot emphasize how much I agree with your I guess your mindset on medications. Medications is only used for interventions, and it's great,
emergencies,
amazing for interventions, but it's not long-term. And I have not ever seen a single case where a long-term drug is effective. For
I
me,
agree. Actually, wait, pause there, because I agree. Is there any? Can you think of anything that may be a long-term drug that's been effective? Anything?
No, I told you I have never seen. I have thought about this because I have the same problem, right? And so I even personally have
What about
experienced
aspirin?
the fact of medications long term does not work. It's the negative effect of the compound effect. Okay, whatever you do, it compounds at the end, and it's a hefty price. It's one of these things where we're talking about the quadrant, right? The important but not urgent things. That's what you got to work on. You have to make sure that you are making the important but not urgent use in the medications to let and avoid putting the medications in that quadrant, basically. So we're going back to the 7 habits of highly effective people. We're talking about the 4 quadrants of urgent and important and urgent not important. Right? We want to focus on long term, because long term the compound effects kicks in, and the medications, just like I told you about the fisherman, right? Imagine if you are a person who don't have enough energy to go fish for yourself. You need that kick, right? You need that kick to get yourself some energy. But after that, you cannot continue to rely on somebody giving you the fish, because you would never learn how to fish yourself. And one of these days, you don't have the guy there to fish for you, or he fish for someone else. So you're gonna starve to death in the end. So the thing is, that's, to me, is a concept of nothing worthwhile is going to have shortcuts. It just isn't. And so your reflections about, there's no quick fixes. There's no quick fixes for the living a balanced life. Living a balanced life is a long-term goal. It's a long-term endeavor. And anything long-term, there is no quick fix for us. There's intervention, but intervention is only for short-term. It is for you to bridge something, for you to for example, we get a loan for a house, right? Because there's no way we can afford a house, so we get a loan for a house. But eventually, you have a house, you need to build up the equity, and so from there, you need to use that equity to do whatever things you want to do and build up your net worth. But imagine that there is no like these quick fixes in the short term for the Americans, right? We'll be like the third world country where you're always poor. You cannot leverage anything. We talk about capitalism, right? Capitalism is one of the things that a lot of people misunderstood, just because, you talk about if America has skyscrapers, right? There is not a single person in America, before all these capitalism comes about, can build a skyscraper on his own. It has to be a collective of everybody else. And that's the borrowing, the credit, and all that. That's the collective effort put into one, that allows you to step. It's a stepping stone to jump onto the next step, and so there are uses for the quick fixes. There are uses for the medications and medicine that we have today. There are uses for opioid. There are uses for heroin. There are uses for morphine. There's uses for a lot of stuff. It's just that we're using it the wrong way. And medications is one of those things where it only applies to short terms. Anything that's long term needs to have. You need to learn how to do it. You need to learn how to do it yourself. And then and that, right. And so
you have to. I mean, like there's no other way. So actually, I'll go over to my dad. So my dad has had my family, high cholesterol runs in my family for whatever reason. I don't know why. My grandparents have had it. My great grandparents have had it. My dad has high cholesterol. So for my entire life that I've known, like my dad's been on statins, like Lipitor or whatever. He had a heart attack when he was. How old was I? I was like 22, so it was like 16 years ago. So he was probably like 50, or something like that. He had a heart attack. It was a pretty minor heart attack or something along those lines, I guess. I don't really know how that is defined, but it seemed like everything was okay. But it was a wake up call for him. So he just recently retired, as we had talked about, about a year ago now. He's been retired for about a year. And we were out golfing on Sunday at one of those, when he was telling me all about like 10 drugs and, stuff that he learned, and we were having a good conversation. So he, ever since he's been retired, he's put a really big focus on his health and wellness. And he goes to the gym regularly, multiple times. His idea of going to the gym before he retired was, I'll go once a week and I'll go, push myself to the limit, and and I'll hurt, my body will hurt the rest of the week, and then I'll feel like that was a workout, right? Well, now he goes pretty much every day, or he takes like long walks around the neighborhood, or at least something to get his body moving every single day. And and then he went on a pretty strict diet where he was portion control, making sure that he only ate certain types of foods, et cetera, because he actually got diagnosed with diabetes like 4 or 5 years ago, and which he's not overweight and he doesn't seem unhealthy. But for some weird reason, his blood sugar was spiking regularly, and he was literally, confirmed as a diabetic, I guess. I don't know how that works. But his A1C, I guess, was high enough where, he was technically a diabetic, and he was put on drugs that he had to take, and yada, yada, yada. He's after this diet that he's been on for the past 7 months. We were golfing the other day, and he goes, hey, how much do you weigh? And I go, why? He goes, how much do you weigh? And I told him how much I weigh, and he goes, okay, well, I'm down to we're not big people, so I weigh like 133 pounds. And my dad's like, well, I'm down to like 160. He's like, I thought I was looking closer to your size, so but either way, he was like, I'm feeling great. He goes, I went to the doctor the other day. He goes, check this out. He goes, like, I've been going to the gym, eating right, because every time I go over there, my mom's like cooking, like my mom's always cooked really healthy meals, but every time I go over there, my mom is a great cook and she loves to cook. And but she's been specifically portion controlling all their meals, to follow along with this particular diet. So if they have like salmon for dinner, we only get like 2 ounces of salmon, or we only get like, she's like very hardcore, like, making sure that he's eating the right way, and he's trying to make sure that he's following the right diet. Anyway, so he's talking to me, and he goes, hey, so I went to the doctor the other day. He's like, guess what? And I go, what? And he goes, I'm not diabetic anymore. He was like, I'm off of statins. I'm off of all those drugs. He's like, I never want to take any drug ever again for the rest of my life. He's like, this is stupid. Like I've been taking statins for 30 plus years in my life, and it hasn't done anything, and he was like, I'm tired of putting this shit in my body. And he was like, I feel great. Like, he was like, but the point where I'm getting at is he's the perfect example of what we're talking about. Like his doctor prescribed him statins, since he was probably like 30 years old, to combat high blood pressure. And he didn't live a sustainable, healthy, balanced lifestyle his entire life, and it resulted in a heart attack, then they give him more drugs and they tell you to do more stuff. And he goes to the doctor, and then he's diabetic and they give him more drugs. Shocker, after only 8 months of putting in the hard work of eating right, living a balanced diet, having a balanced diet, and exercising regularly, he's no longer, in any risk category, and he doesn't have to take these drugs anymore. Yeah. Like it's not rocket science, but it takes hard work. Like, and it also feels better. He feels better.
But the thing is, the point is that it gets you results. You're taking the drug, you still have high blood pressure, you still have diabetes, right?
Right.
He didn't have diabetes before. He's taking the statin, right?
Right.
It makes him become diabetic.
Is that what it does?
It actually creates diseases, symptoms.
Oh, does it really? I didn't know that actually.
Yes. That's the thing is, so on my side, right, I've been taking diabetic medication for 20 years.
I didn't know that. I know you said you were diabetic, but I didn't know you've been taking it for that long. Yeah.
I've got diagnosed when I was 23, very young. I wasn't obese at all. I was like, I'm talking about like skinny. I was skinny and I was diabetic. Right. Okay. And I've taken the drugs for 20 years, and the blood sugar level is always like erratic. It jumps up and down, and right. A1C was, you can't even say under control, but it gets worse and worse every year. It gets worse and worse, and the number gets higher and higher. And the doctors, would actually, increases the dosage more and more, eventually to the point where I'm taking these medications, like a lot of these, and my sugar level is still like maximum, like 300, 400 easily without doing anything. And it gets to the point where my eyes become blurry because like I'm basically losing my eyesight. And so that's when I got a wake-up call, said, this medication is actually killing me.
Right.
And for me, so basically that's what I did is I actually quit taking medication cold turkey. Like I could, because it's making me, because when I have diabetes, right, it raises my cholesterol.
Did it really? I didn't know that. Yeah.
Right. So I have diabetes. I have high blood pressure. I have cholesterol. I have a bunch of other things. So I'm taking diabetic medications. I'm taking statin. I'm taking some others, lisinopril or something like that for high blood pressure and all that. So it actually causes more problems. Yeah. Right. And for me, when I was diabetic, it looks like I have been like my body has been beating to a pulp. It's like it's like inflamed, right? Your face, right. It's inflamed. You're not fat, but it's your body is being inflamed because of all these drugs that's getting to the between your muscle cells and all that. It's in there, and it doesn't work. The only thing it does, it makes it worse. And right. That's the key lessons here is it doesn't solve the problem. It never did. Never solves. Will never will. Right. That's the key lesson for you, for your dad, and for me. That's a lesson. It does not solve your problem. It only holds it back. Right. For a short term. And that causes people to take it for granted and say, because I took diabetic medications, it's gonna fix my sugar went down. Yeah. Oh, I should continue to take it. And that's not how it should be working. It's to say, okay, now that I have this brace on, right, these crutches, right, I need to say, imagine you broke your leg, right? You need the crutches for 6 months, but you need to work on that leg so that it can be without the crutches. And that should be the goal, not to say, hey, I'm gonna use the crutches from now on out. Yeah, right. And right, to me, that was a mistake I made, right? And I have regret that mistake. It's not for you to take it and continue to move forward with it. If you're on crutches, your job and your goal would be to use the crutches to help you strengthen the broken leg and let it heal and let it becomes adjusted to and some more support and getting stronger every day. That's the way you should transition. It's like a bridge. You're supposed to use it as a bridge, not as a forever thing. And the medications and medicine that we have today, like I say, it's amazing. It's super amazing, and it saves countless lives. But that's the thing is people are using the wrong way. I mean, we're talking about heroin, you're talking about opioid, right? People say, oh, this is bad. We're talking about like the steroids, for example. You see people using steroids for the sports and Olympic and all that, right? But the thing is, the drug isn't the bad thing. Is that how you use it was bad. You use it in the wrong context. And so imagine that, because I'm sure Amelia had steroids injected into her body.
Oh yeah.
Right. So to me,
dexamethasone. That was the big one for her lungs to try to get her off the ventilator. That we only got to do it one time. Anyway, yeah.
I mean, there's countless usage
right.
for steroids using it
Right.
in the right way, and so it's a good thing. But if you use it a bad thing, it will become bad, and that's something that we need to realize and learn. I guess my pet peeve for this thing in itself is how the pharmaceutical is portraying it. I mean, I love the way that we invented medicine and we are using it for intervention and we were saving a lot of lives. It's just how the pharmaceutical companies are spinning it to make it look like, hey, this is what you need to accompany you on your journey. Is not.
That's the whole story of OxyContin, basically. They that the book that I was telling you that I read, Dreamland, which is a really good book. I mean, like if you have any desire to want to learn about how the opioid epidemic, kind of came about in the country, like and how we got to where we got to today, where it's this crisis where people are literally just dying in the streets, and and you have to get naloxone, you have to get all these other things to go, revive the dead, and people carrying around anyway. I totally just lost my train of thought, but you just said, what did you just say right before that?
The pharmaceutical companies.
Oh, the pharmaceutical companies. So Purdue Pharma, there was this guy in the 70s that wrote, it wasn't a clinical study, it was not anything, he did a quick research of like 100 patients at a certain New England hospital, where they monitored the use of opioids in the hospital, and whether or not it led to addictive behavior beyond the hospital when they took it away after the in the hospital setting of use. And he found there was no statistical showing that if you weren't already addicted to opioids or something along those lines before you came in, to the hospital, that using opioids in the hospital when you needed to use it led to a continued prolonged opioid addiction. So he wrote this like little note, penned it, sent it off to the New England Journal of Medicine or whatever the hell it was, as just like an editor's note for something.
Right.
And he sent it to the editor. Somehow this got published in like a little handwritten blurb or whatever from this guy. And then Purdue Pharma found it like a decade later when they were making OxyContin, and they used that little blurb as clinical definition, of studies that said opioid use is not shown to be addictive. So then they would go to these doctors and they would say, like, look, and then the whole pain industry started to say, like, and all the medical professions started to say, hey, pain is like a fifth marker that we need to be monitoring for people, which I don't disagree. Like, you should monitor people's pain levels when they're in an acute setting and they're in a like you said, in an intervention setting. But then they started monitoring pain going forward, I guess, and then they said, look, pain is now one of those things that we're monitoring. Purdue Pharma and this New England Journal of Medicine is saying that it's not addictive. They created the time release capsule of OxyContin, and then boom, like that was how they were like, you should just prescribe this long-term to your patients. Like, and doctors were like, okay, maybe it is okay. Maybe it's not addictive. Like, Purdue's saying it's not addictive. This guy's saying it's not addictive. Right. Like, and then, before you know it, you have what we have today, where where it is addictive. Lo and behold, like, it doesn't solve people's long-term problems. Like, and it never will. Like, it never will, ever. Like, I don't care what somebody comes up with from like an opioid perspective. Like, it will never be something you can take every single day that will not become addictive. It just is not. That's not its purpose. Its purpose is to be an interventionist style drug to take away pain in an acute setting. That is its job. Like, that is the purpose of opioids. And they do their purpose. I mean,
everything
well.
has its purpose.
Right.
And
right.
if you I guess treat the system, the compound effect will catch up to you. And that's what happened. There is somebody just wants to kind of lie a little bit. and
it wasn't a lie. I mean, but
they cheated. They didn't they didn't do the studies. They just say, hey, somebody say something, we're going to use it. And so they knew I guess the little oops,
Right. Right.
and they continue to let it go, and that creates the compound effect. It dominoes throughout the layers of whatever those things that cascade, right? It creates something much bigger than what it originally was. And so that's the power of compound effects.
Right.
And so you think about if you broke your leg and you have a cast put on your leg from the toe to the hip, right? As a cast. What's the purpose of a cast?
I mean, it's to keep you stable
so that you don't re-injure yourself.
Right.
But what happens if you keep the cast forever?
I mean, your leg would atrophy and your muscles would, you wouldn't be able to move.
Exactly. That's my point, because you think about the cast as medications, as a medicine. It's not supposed to last long term.
Right.
Right. Not to say that the cast is bad, but the cast is good for short term because it allows your body, your legs to heal, and it doesn't it prevents you re-injuring your leg and make it worse, right? But for short term, it's good. But for long term, it's bad because your leg becomes atrophy and becomes like a skeleton. There's nothing in it. You won't be able to move your leg. Even like after 2 years, take out the cast, right? You wouldn't be able to use your leg. Imagine you do it for 20 years. Imagine putting a cast for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. What do you think happens to your leg? They were put in a cast.
It'd be. I don't even know if it would still be around. It'd probably decayed
I
and fallen off.
You would not be able to use your leg at all after a year, right? Most casts are about 3 months, 6 months. I mean, a year is when you have something like you couldn't heal that.
Right.
Whenever you did it, you couldn't heal that quick, or you have so severe. But because the longer you kept your cast in it, the harder it is for you to do the physical therapy to get it back to normal. Because I broke both my arms and I had in the cast, right? And it didn't last like 3 months. But when the cast was broken, my hand was like completely frozen. It won't move at all. And you have to like physically do therapy to get it back to normal. And that's like 3 months, 6 months, something like that. Probably 3 months.
Right.
Imagine you did.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't use it,
I basically lose it. You'll use it.
Yeah, if you don't use it, you lose it. Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, we've talked about this many times.
So you think about the medications, right? Let's say statin, right? Statin's supposed to keep cholesterol in check, but because you have the medication that does its job, that means that the functions of the cell or the organs in the body is not doing that job anymore. It's taking a rest. But then you won't let them go back to work. Well, eventually in essence, you fired the organ's functions, and it goes away. It dies or whatever. And then suddenly what do you think is going to happen? You're supposed to only give it a rest until the organs, can recuperate and get back to work. And that's what you're supposed to do. When you broke your leg, you're supposed to put it in a cast, let it heal, and then get it back to work. Same thing with medications. You're supposed to use it as a bridge for the next phase. You cannot continue to use it because your organs or whatever functions as we're doing it no longer functions. So
I mean, it's just never. This isn't how the universe works. Like there is no pill to make your life happy or anxious, less anxious, or make you more loving, or make you more like it just takes hard work. I mean, like especially like the mental drugs.
It has to be done organically. Whatever is worthwhile needs to have the ingredient of time.
Like we want to, actually one of the things that I hear a lot from like celebrities these days is like microdosing on like mushrooms and or doing ayahuasca or something like that, how it changed their perspective and yada yada yada. The truth is what you and I have been doing for the past 2.5 years or whatever it is. We've been basically doing mushrooms and ayahuasca or whatever, where we've been doing it organically. We've been doing it sustainably. We don't need to just go to some shaman where we puke in a bucket for
because
4 hours or whatever.
You cannot absorb every single thing you have to, because let's say you took some mushroom, right? And you have this like open connections to your neurons, and there's a bunch of input that you never seen before. How much of those experience and the input that you can process and retain? It needs time to process, but you and I do this thing. Yes, it's like, okay, we did it in 2 years instead of doing it in 1 or 2 settings. But we are absorbing the data and input that comes into our brains, and we are taking it and we're processing it, right? And so we're processing it a small chunk at a time.
Right.
But eventually, because of time, it compresses, it becomes big. But a person go take these mushrooms and the psilocybin or whatever kind of drug. So there is some usage, but it's only to as a temporary, because if you open the flood gate, right? How much of the water can you drink?
Not that much. That's why it's so overwhelming of an experience. And not to your point, like I think there is some value to it for sure.
There is,
because it can open you up to the possibility that there is right there is other things that you can broaden the connectedness of the universe, and all these other things, and get outside of where you're at today. Like I get it for that perspective, but then to do it like all the time, and to think that that's the only time you can
once to understand what experience you should be getting, and then try to do that organically, right? Know what it is they're looking for, and then work towards finding a way to get there.
Exactly.
Because you can't just say, hey, I took this mushroom, I want to take it again to go it again. I take it again to go again. You only take it once. That's all you need.
Right.
Because you just need to know what are you looking for, and then you got to figure out, okay, how do I get back that experience? Because you can I continue to use it? Because if you, like I said, go back to my analogy, if you broke your leg, you can't use a cast. The cast is there. You need it. You need to know
your brain's there. The mental connections, the neurons, that imagination is there. It exists. Like it always exists. It will always be there. If you don't use it, you lose it, right? Like we said, like your imagination is no different. Like your creativity is no different. You're right. Like, I mean, it is true. If you don't use it, you lose it. Like it's do you remember that line from have you ever seen the 40-Year-Old Virgin? When he was at the he takes his girlfriend's daughter to like the gynecologist or something like that, and she was like getting like some drug. I don't know, for whatever reason he decided he would take her, and he was, when she was asking some questions, he started asking his own questions about sexual health and wellness or whatever, and he was like, is it true if you don't use it, you lose it? Just like, I mean, every time I hear that, I can't think of Steve Carell. But no, I mean, I think our points are, I'm glad that I'm learning this at this stage of my life as well. Because like it's overwhelming to get inundated by pop culture, by marketing, by television, by all these big businesses to just beat you over the head that, like, hey, there's a drug for that. Hey, there's something you can do for that. Hey, you want to be happy? Go take ayahuasca. Hey, you want to be, whatever, go do this. Hey, you want to be
there's sleeping
not
pills,
have diabetes,
there's mood pills, there's like diet pills, there's all sorts of stuff. And that's, to me, is so much noise from the media and the pharmaceutical companies that it's hard for anyone not to be influenced by them.
I mean,
the only way for us to defend it is to know, is to learn the lessons from the people who have went through the hard way. Like I said,
to live a balanced existence, is to do what we're trying to do for people in Clubney. I mean, is to help people to live that life. I mean, like
Right.
that's the only way to do this. Like, in my opinion. I mean, sorry, that's not true. I should not say that's the only way to do this, because like we don't know anything. But
It's one other way we know.
It's one of the ways that we know how to not have to depend on pharmaceuticals in order to live the lives that we want to live. Yeah.
I mean, this is why we have this year of magical learning, because these are the kind of things that we don't talk about. And because we don't talk about, we don't know about it. And so we easily can be persuaded by the media, by the big pockets pharmaceutical company that wants more profits. And so without these, stories and discussions, and the lessons that we learn from them, we maybe privy to becoming a victims of these confusions.
Yeah.
Right. It confuses you so that you don't know what's right, what's wrong, until you follow the advice. And what is the goal of the pharmaceutical companies?
I actually think that this is the funny part about it all, is I don't think that any sales rep that worked at Purdue Pharma that was selling OxyContin was like, yeah, I'm a drug dealer and I'm getting people hooked on opioids. Like, I think that they thought they were trying to help people, because I think they don't want people to have pain.
Right, but somebody up top, kind of like knew the informations, and
I still think that they were mission driven, and they were trying to help the Sadler family, or is it Sattler family, or whatever the family was that owned Purdue Pharma. Like they've donated an insane amount of money to like NYU and their medical school and other places. I mean, these guys were like incredibly important people in the medical community in general, and like to think that they had some malicious intent behind them.
This goes back to what I said about let my people go surfing. I feel the same way, because you saying I want to do good, less bad, less evil. Right. So that means that you should praise me.
Yeah.
It's like, Chris, I only punched you once. I could have punched you 10 times, but I only punched you once. You should appreciate and praise me for being a good guy. That's how I feel. And to me, to say I donate this, but at the same time, even now, right, there's a lot of things that comes about. If we can get away with it, we would.
Right. Yeah. No, I don't. I mean,
right.
I can't.
Same thing with let people go surfing. Oh, I'm environmentally conscious. If you are, then you stop. Why are you still doing it? If you're still doing it, that means, hey, I only punch you once. You should praise me as this gracious, generous guy, and grovel before me, put me on a pedestal. And so that's how I feel. I mean, I don't know. That's you.
Look, I can't disagree with you at all. Like when we talked about Patagonia, like how they want to be sustainable, clothing.
You want to be sustainable? Stop doing it. Stop doing it.
I know. Stop making clothes.
I'm doing less harm.
You know how you can do less harm?
But the point is, you still doing harm. I mean, the point is, you're still punching somebody in the face.
Right.
Right. Say, I only punch you once. I didn't punch you twice. Therefore, I'm the good guy.
I can't. I hesitate to shit on other people's purposes in life if they feel like they're purpose driven. If Yvon Chouinard feels like this is his purpose,
I'm fine with whatever you do. Don't preach something else.
Right.
If you say I'm making money and because I could,
right,
I probably
then okay. Yeah.
But the problem I have with is you telling me you're a good guy, but then you punch me in the face. Say, look, I'm a bad guy. I punch you in the face. Take it. But you say, I'm a good guy. I punch you in the face. I only punch you once. To me, that's what I have a problem with. Don't declare something that you're not. You get it. I don't care if you say, well, this is how I make money. So this is some harm to the environment. Label me as whatever you want to label me. I mean, I accept the consequences of my actions. The thing is, in this world, you will always be responsible for your actions. One way or another, you will be responsible for your actions. We talked about karma before, right? You will be responsible for your actions. You cannot say, okay, you label me as something else just because, right? You can't fool me into thinking you're a good guy when you say, hi, I'm doing less harm to the environment. The problem is you still doing harm to the environment. So you can't say that I'm a good guy or I'm whatever.
I mean, this might be a dumb take, but Jerry Sandusky, you know, the Penn State football coach, I mean, for 35 years of his life, you know, it looked like he was helping to set youth up for a better life. And you know, and then, you know, obviously
because
you find
that disgusts me, right? If you are a bad person, like, don't go out there and fool people into thinking that you're a good guy. To me, that is I don't know if it's even correct, but that's the biggest sin, is to lie to people. Because you said you come out and say, I'm a good person, I'm a great person, I am helping the youth, right? But you're using that as a scapegoat for you to do the evil things in the back. To me,
that's your real purpose, you know.
Is abhorrent. This is the worst thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Right?
Yeah,
I would say, well, if you're some kind of bad guy and you do it and you label that, I mean, because at least you admit you own up to your actions.
Yeah, you know, at least drug dealers that are dealing heroin on the street, they know what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that any of them go around saying, "Hey, I'm just trying to ease pain," you know, like, and you know, and I'm just trying to help, you know, like, no, they're like, no, I'm trying to make some money to feed my family, and I get it that I'm making people addicted and they're living awful lives,
right?
But like,
but the thing is, if Yvonne Sharna had never wrote the book, I would have respected. But he wrote the book telling people that, you know, follow my actions. You know, this is what you should do. To me, that puts me off.
I could not agree more with you.
If he would have documented and said, this is what I did. I'm not proud of it, but this is what I did. Okay.
Right.
If you think you want to follow, that's fine. It's up to you. Right. If you don't, that's fine. But don't go out there and say, oh, you know, this is where you're supposed to be acting, and everybody's on the community say, oh, you know, the Patagonia is you know, environmentally friendly. We should take them as a role model. I mean, to me, that's BS, a bunch of BS, right? You are causing the generations. Let's go back to what I think about a farmer. It's like you spin this angle of drugs as the companion for your life. You should take it forever. Because you are exploiting its purpose for something that is not intended. That's the same thing they did for Patagonia, right? You know better than the pharmaceutical company that spin it to know that, hey, medication, like I said, medication isn't bad, or to do whatever Patagonia isn't bad. It's what they say that should be how they spin it. Right.
Yeah. I agree. I 100% agree with what you're saying, and honestly, that's what we're trying to not do in Clubany. We're, you know,
right. We want to make sure that, because what happened is when you say, well, the pharmaceuticals are bad, right? Don't take your medications. Well, it's not good for you either. If you have a heart attack, you need the medications. If you have high blood pressures and you need it for like today, well, you need to take it. Right. People don't understand. They get confused because, you know, one person took it, and
you need clothes. You got to wear clothes. Like, you know,
you got to wear clothes.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not that what anyone did. Is how you spin it to label you as something else. That's hiding under the ship's skin, like a wolf in ship's clothing. To me, that is the devious aspect of thing that, to me, it grinds my gears.
Yeah, no, I hear you loud and clear. I mean, I think integrity. That's why I added integrity in my own core values.
Integrity is in my number 2, right? Balance, integrity, right? So for me,
do what you say what you do, or do what you say what you care about, and then go do that. Like, and if you're not doing that, then you don't care about it. Like, I mean, it's either you either care about it or you don't, and you show that through your actions, or you don't. You know, and like that's called, in my opinion, I call that conscious living. You know, like it's a conscious effort to live the way that you say you want to live through your actions every single day that you represent out to the world. Because if you're not then like you can go to church every single day, but like, you know, like you said, anyway, we're a little over time today. I mean, I think we're beating a dead horse. But great
Yeah, the horse
discussion in
already
general.
dead. Don't beat it.
Exactly. We should put a pin on the horse and just let him be, you know. But no, I think that was a great discussion in general. But I would highly recommend people to read this book. I think it's important.
But I think this is an important lesson to learn. Is we have to make sure that we use the inventions we have, the medicines, the right way, right? It's not that opioid are bad. It's not that medications is bad. It's not that doctors are bad.
Clothes are bad, you know.
It's not all bad. It's because you spin it in a way that it is intended. So you need to make sure that you know what can be applied and what cannot be. Because if you don't apply it, the intervention may have saved you, that you just pass on the opportunity to continue to save yourself. But if you continue to take the advice of the pharmaceuticals, right, it's gonna make you worse, and you're gonna have to end up paying a hefty price for the effect, the compound effect that it did on your body.
I could not agree more. I was joking with my one of my cousins is just graduated from pharmacy school. So she's finishing. I think she's getting ready to go into her residency or whatever. And I was joking with her. We were at a family get together over the summer, and I was like, "Oh, so you're officially a drug dealer? Congratulations!" You know, and she was like, "Yep, that's what we do. We, you know, we're drug pushers, you know." And yeah, but like the truth is it's not much. That's not true. Like there's no difference between my cousin going to school for 7 years to be a pharmacist or whatever the hell she has to go to, and then going through residency, versus some dude that, you know, grew up in Jalisco, Mexico, that, you know, grew up in the heroin trade, and, you know, I mean, and went through that his entire life, and, you know, understood from farm to table drugs, you know, like, you know, what like you could call it whatever you want to call it. It's still just peddling drugs, you know. Now, like, having the right context is important. So, I mean, if I was ever going to be, I'm not saying that pharmacists are not important. Like, I mean, I'm
right. It's all about context.
They're very important. I'm not shitting on pharmacists or something. I'm
well,
just,
like I said, not drugs, not pharmaceutical, not doctors, right? It's the applications in the context.
You know, actually, this is the best story I could ever tell with this whole thing. When I was 27, I started having panic attacks, and I went to my family doctor that had been seeing me since I was 5 years old or whatever. And I shit you not, I'm sitting there and I thought I had like a heart attack. The first time I had a panic attack, I was like, I don't know what's going on. I was freaking out. I was like, I mean, it was scary as hell. Like, I mean, my friends had to drive me home from work, and like, you know, I just laid on the couch the rest of the day, and like, I didn't know what the hell was going on. I thought I was falling apart or something like that. So I go to my doctor the next day, and he goes, he's asking me questions, you know, examining me, and I'm telling him what happened. And he was like, "Chris, how's your faith?" And I go, it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I was like, what are you talking about, Dr. Lawless? And he was like, how, you know, like, do you have a relationship with God? And I go, what does this have to do with, like, I'm dying over here, man. Like, you know, and he was like, I'm just asking. He's like, it sounds like you had a panic attack. And he was like, it sounds like, you know, maybe you should work through that. He was like, I'm going to prescribe you some Xanax, but he was like, but, you know, I don't think this is the solution. I mean, that's what a good doctor is. Like, that's like, I mean, I respect the shit out of that. I appreciate that, because he was right. This was I could be still taking Xanax to this day if you know, and still having panic attacks and be like, well, I just have panic attacks. Well, no, I have panic attacks because I was unhealthy in terms of like the way that I was living my life, and what I cared about and what I was trying to do, and the environment that I was in, and all these different factors that I had to go self-explore and discover that for myself to be able to get through that and get past that, right? Like, Xanax is not the solution. Like, if anything, it would have been just awful if I was still taking it for forever. So I really respect my doctor at the end of the day for saying that, like, because he's right. Like, I mean, I didn't have a relationship with God, with faith, with anything. I hadn't sat down and thought and spent time reflecting, writing, you know, reading, like all the things that we care about and all the things that we're doing. I had not put in the work. Like, I did not deserve that drug beyond that. The week that he would need to prescribe that in my panicked state that I was in at that point in time. But once that was stabilized, like you said, once the cast was on, like, I needed to do the fucking work. And that's really what everybody needs to do, is do the fucking work, you know, like, yeah.
Yes, it's to support you for temporary. It's not supposed to support long term. Yeah, but I think
Exactly.
that dead horse is torn to pieces.
Yeah, sorry. All right, let's get out of here. All right. So the question we can leave with everybody is what crutches do you lean on for quick fixes to solve your problems, and what would life look like without them? You know, maybe something to think hard about. And if you don't have answers to that, we're happy to like talk to you about it and you know, have a deeper conversation as well and see if we can help you guys out.
Yeah.
So yeah, we will. Thanks for joining us, and
You
we'll
guys
see you all
come
tomorrow.
say hi. Yeah. All right. Well, we see you next time, and looking forward to the exciting episode.
You got it.